good morning. Good morning, good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. It is so nice to have you here, Matt, this morning. This is Matt Silver. I'm Deborah DeBoer, and we're going to do our Friday Fuel this morning. So I'm just going to ask Matt some interesting questions, but first I'm going to tell you who he is. He is a longtime realtor, still a working realtor, and what he does now in his spare time, which I think there's probably very little of, he does a lovely job of being the president of Illinois Realtors. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Illinois Realtors is, what an interesting time you have chosen to become president of a real estate association.
I'd have it no other way.
No other way. So I'm going to start with a hard question. What's the biggest challenge you're seeing facing our realtors today?
I think that people, just based on what's been happening at the national level and then in the economy in general, I think people just feel very much in limbo. They're not getting a lot of answers from the National Association on where we're heading and where we're going. But it's no fault of the National, because they're waiting for rulings to come down, for determinations to be made. And as I said yesterday at the Women's Council of Illinois installation, shameless plug, we just have to get comfortable living in a little bit of gray space for right now. And that's okay. Because in point to your question, I think I'm the right person at the right time. I listen a lot, I'm very compassionate, and I'm very interested in what the members are thinking and what they have to say. And I'm a great conduit between the working realtor member and, frankly, the staffs at all the locals and the state association. So it helps a lot.
It always surprises me how few of the people who work as staff actually have a real estate license.
It's remarkable.
It's remarkable. And how often I end up saying to someone, hey, wait a minute, those are my people. Let me talk to you about what that really means. Because people have funny ideas about what realtors do and how they behave. So oftentimes I feel like I am the voice at an association level, at a local level, saying, wait a minute, I am them. So let me tell you what I think is really happening here. Not to toot my own horn, but experience counts.
Yes,
that
it
when
does.
you walked in other people's shoes, I think that makes a difference for people.
Indeed, it does.
Yes.
Indeed.
So certainly the things that are going on nationally, locally here, interest rates, inventory also having an effect on everyone?
Oh, yeah. Interest rates were on a 9 or 10 week decline, and the market heated up. And then all of a sudden, inflation numbers came out. Because I think the market was so hot, all of a sudden, buyers jumped off the ledge and were ready to buy. And now all of a sudden, rates bumped up a little bit. Yes. They're back up over 7, and we saw a slight pause. I mean, when you talk about low inventory, you talk about the pent-up demand. The only thing, in my opinion, that's going to have an effect one way or the other is going to be the interest rates, because you either can't afford it or you can't. And regardless of whether or not people think you should, that saying, right? Yeah. Date the rate and marry the house. It's terrific, but if you can't swing it for a year or two waiting for the rates to drop so that you can refinance, that's going to be a problem.
That's going to be a problem.
One thing I always say is that prices always increase, except for 08, 09, right? But that was like the first correction that I think we've seen in the marketplace, generally speaking, around the country and especially locally. So.
Yes, I think people just people got crazy when they had these low interest rates.
13-year run we had.
Yes, and so we're having to get them used to back again to, these are pretty normal.
This is a very normal market at 7%.
At 7%, yes.
Exactly.
And people are like going, oh, that. And really, no.
But the economy functions better too, believe it or not.
Everything functions better. Everything functions better.
We're very normalized.
When people can buy houses and are
Correct.
Comfortable with the idea that they're going to be safe and sound with houses. One of the things as I drove in this morning, I noticed, because I come from Crystal Lake, so I come a long way, how many apartments are being built.
Yeah.
These big blocks of apartments. And when I couple that with the fact that the average age of the first-time home buyer these days, 36, I think, well, that's where all those people who are waiting to buy their first house at 36, it must be where they're going to live. But I also look at them and have, again, being experienced again, and think, I'll bet those builders built them so they can flip into condominiums at some point.
Yes. That's the way it used to be. If you remember, they would rent, and then they would flip, right? Because they were all paid for, and then they sold them off. And
yes.
They basically double dipped.
And
is
I
the way
think they
looked at
must
that.
have to be thinking about doing that again.
Yeah, the problem I'm seeing right now too, not to change the subject, but to dive a little bit deeper, is pre-pandemic we were 1.5 million short,
Yes.
units short nationally speaking, and now we're almost 6 million, maybe even over 6 million units short. That's for everybody who's like, in the market, who wants to, get a mortgage, do that kind of thing, who we know about. There's probably millions more who are, sort of timing it. You can never time the market. I think right now is always the best time to get in.
I do too. Just buy a house.
Right.
Get started.
But that's a lot of units. If we could figure out how to get municipalities and the states and town halls and all of the elected officials to stop, really just to stop hammering away at real estate with hidden property taxes and impact fees and all of the things that are discouraging builders from buying, or building, I should say, we'd have a lot more product available. But it's virtually impossible to do workforce housing now and make it using those, I don't know if I'm a camera or not, but to make it quote unquote affordable.
That's a great phrase that you taught me on Monday that I hadn't heard, workforce housing. Talk a little bit about what that means.
I think, when I'm speaking around the state, affordable housing in Edwardsville or in Collinsville or in Skokie or in Winnetka, right? I mean, I just named 4 towns that are wildly different,
Yes.
right? Vastly different regions. The average home in the North Shore-Barrington is about $992,000, right? Collinsville, I think your average home price is just above the median, which is closer to $400,000. So affordable there could be $200,000.
Yes.
Affordable in Winnetka might be $500,000. The numbers are very different, and so in my personal travails, and when I'm talking about it, what I'm thinking about are the teachers on a teacher salary, the cops, the firefighters, the people who are picking up our garbage, who are working at the public works for the towns. They need to be able to create generational wealth as well, and they need to be able to afford a home. And so that's kind of what I'm referring to with workforce housing.
I love that idea of workforce housing rather than affordable housing. Affordable housing, I think, in many ways has a negative connotation.
I agree.
And workforce housing, first place I encountered that was years ago in Big Sky, Montana, or
Oh,
Wyoming,
yeah,
Montana.
sure.
Because they had to haul, they ran buses from Bozeman to bring in people who would actually work in the ski towns
Correct.
because they had no housing
They
for
had,
them.
they had no housing, and they had no place for them to rent even.
To rent even.
Zero.
Right.
We talked about it on Monday. Bloomington has got 4,000 Rivian employees, and the bulk of them are living in hotels in Bloomington because there's no housing available. There's not enough housing stock.
And apparently it's not easy enough to build it because
Correct.
if someone could build it, they would come. Clearly they would come.
That's the adage, right?
But
So-
they can't see, that's what you're talking about with government and all the fees
Correct.
and all that stuff.
Correct.
Because otherwise people would build it if they could figure out how.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think that's a big initiative. So Illinois Realtors is working on some of those programs?
Yep. Jeff Baker, the CEO of Illinois Realtors, and the Powerhouse State Advocacy team down there, they put together a bill. It's workforce housing legislation, and they've submitted it, and it's just kind of working through the channels. So I'm very hopeful. We'll see how that goes.
I am hopeful. That would be-
because that would be a huge thing.
That would be a huge thing. The other thing I wanted to ask you about that you talked about on Monday, we had a designated managers meeting and you were gracious enough to speak there.
I was very honored to speak there.
Thank you. You talked a little bit about the scholarships that were available and the...
With REEF, the Real
with
Estate
REEF.
Education
Can you talk
Foundation.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's when I first started volunteering, I was on the GRI board of governors.
I do remember GRI.
Which was an amazing experience for me, and I think pretty much anybody who had served in those capacities. Jim Kinney, my managing broker at the time, said, you're about to step into a business that gives a lot to you, and you should be able to give back. And I've never forgotten those words, and I've always sort of lived by it, which is why I do so much volunteer work, candidly. And not just in real estate, but I'm also sitting on a couple of different boards, one with All Chicago, and the other one is with the Boys and Girls Club in Little Village. I want to be able to lend talent, lend a voice, bring awareness to, the disenfranchised and the discriminated against. a big thing for me. I know that doesn't cover the question, but I have a wormhole and I forgot what you
The question is, talk to me a little bit about what the scholarships available are.
Oh, the REAF
No,
scholarships.
you did okay. You did fine.
So right after my stint at the GRI board, I didn't really know what to do. And
By the way, just let me tell you, because there'll be a lot of people who don't know what GRI is.
oh, the
It's
Graduate Realtor Institute.
Yes, which
Right.
when you and I started in real estate was a big deal.
It was.
And you still can get that designation, but it's morphed into a little bit different way to achieve it.
It is. It used to be, it would take a year and a half to do because it was only offered twice a year. So it was the week after Thanksgiving, which was a dead week in business for everybody in real estate. And then it was the week after Super Bowl, which I actually, in conjunction with a lot of other people, we moved and had it up here, I want to say in Schaumburg. But attendance started dropping because unfortunately, I think a lot of people went, oh my God, I can't take this much time away from my family or my business or doing whatever just to get a designation. But I will tell you that those designations, that CRS, the GRI, the others that I hold, they have literally been the foundation because when times get tough and the markets go up and down, and we all know that that's very
Yes.
commonplace, that's my foundation. That is literally my bedrock, and I can dip back into everything that I learned back then. Those programs were incredible. Back to REAF. The Real Estate Education Foundation is probably the most selfless servant position you can hold at the state level, in my opinion. There are, I want to say, 22 total scholarships available. They range from $500 for people who want to get pre-license or post-license work done, and then on top of it, you've got the Jim Kinney Scholarship. There are, I think, up to $2,000 that you can get to go to an advanced institution in state or out of state, and it's incredible. The folks that sit at that board do incredible work, for real.
Let's switch a little bit. You also are an active working realtor.
Yes.
How did that happen? How did that happen that you became a realtor?
It's funny. I went to school at Michigan State University. I got my degree in hotel, restaurant, and institutional management because much like anybody who has the gift of gab, I wanted to be able to work with people on a one-to-one or group setting sort of situation. So I decided to become a chef.
Okay, I didn't
Because I got tired
that.
of dealing
I
with the
didn't
general
realize.
public, which was
Okay.
kind of interesting too. But I wanted to learn all facets of that business, and it's 120 hours a week. It's a lot of time. I mean,
It
there
is.
were days where I was leaving the restaurant at 2:00 in the morning, and I was back there by 6. So not a lot of sleep. Kind of burned out. Decided that I was going to go sell wine. There was a gentleman up here. I think he's still in Lake Forest, but it's Terlato Wines. And in between when I left being a manager and chef and doing all that stuff, I was waiting tables just to sort of clear my head and make some cash. And that was actually when there was cash. And it wasn't credit cards, but it was fantastic. And Tony said, "Oh my God, you know so much about wine. Why don't you just come work for me?" And I thought, "Oh my God, maybe I should. Maybe I should." Started talking to my dad, who was sort of an incredible mentor, and he said, "You know, if you're going to get into sales, just come work with me. It doesn't matter what you sell. You have to love the product. I understand, but at the same time, you really have to love who you're working with, and just be respectful and kind and whatnot." And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go work with my dad. And we did so for 10 years. So that was
Your dad
amazing.
was in real estate.
My dad was in flexible packaging sales. How do you like that?
Okay.
Yeah. So I had clients, Mars and Tootsie Roll. We did a lot of printed roll stocks and, all the individual wrappers around all that stuff. It was fascinating to me. Excuse me. And one thing led to the next. And I just, for the 10 years that I was there, I could not crack the 6-figure mark. And I was hustling. I was hungry. I met my, soon-to-be wife at that time, and I decided I was going to figure out a new path where I could make some money and use, the skill sets that I had. And I decided that I was going to go into real estate. But I interviewed with literally over 200 different firms and companies in every business, from medical sales devices to wine to, you name it, right? And real estate, I was just drawn to it because there are so many avenues and so many different things that you can do. I thought, well, this is going to be an incredible experience for me. So I got into it. I was in commercial for 19 months. We talked about that just briefly. Not going to go into that, but it wasn't the right fit for me. I felt there was like a lack of integrity at that time. This is 26 years ago. Things have changed drastically because I know many commercial brokers, and it's still part of my DNA. And so I always have a soft spot for the commercial group. But I decided to get into residential because at the time it felt like it was a very part-time business way back then.
Yes.
And I thought, you know what? I can really create a massive practice and just do this full-on, full-time, and run it like a business and just report to myself, which is why I think a lot of people get into it, right? Or possibly. I got tired of all the corporate America stuff.
Well, two things interesting that you said to me there. One of them is,
Only two?
oh, well, I'll find
I'm
some
kidding.
more,
Don't
Matt.
worry.
Don't worry about it. I'll find some more. One of them is, you said you interviewed with all sorts of people to decide what you wanted to do.
Correct.
You're a good researcher.
Yes.
Does being a researcher make a difference in your real estate business?
Without question. Because I think you've got to learn to analyze the data. You've got to learn the landscape. You have to know what's going on. You know, real estate is very hyper-focused and very local. We all know that, right? But when you can start to see the trends that are sort of happening, you can be way ahead of the game. And that's where I use the data, all the stuff that I get from the national level and the state level, all the talking points that we always get, not just as, you know, as a member of the leadership team, but, you know, just all the stuff that the associations pump out for us. I mean, it's incredible. There is nugget upon nugget upon nugget in there, which just drives us to be able to be better at who we are and how we do it.
And that brings me to the second thing that I noticed in the speech that I'm sorry, I'll find some more. But the second thing that I noticed, and that was you appeared to me to be a lifelong learner. Mm-hmm. And is that important in your career?
It is, because I think the way real estate is today is very, very different than it is the way when I first started, which is 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed, we were talking about designations, most of the people that are getting in the business now, they could care less about the designations, which to me is a huge mistake, because those, as I said earlier, they just provide an incredible foundation. And when you think about 4 days out of your life or 12 days to get the CRS or whatever the number is, that's lifelong education for you. And the continuing ed that we provide at the state and all the different schools around, it just makes a huge difference. And for me, the more you know, the better off you are, right?
The other thing about designations that I liked is I got to meet the smartest people. So when I was doing designations or I was taking a class somewhere, I got to meet the people that I wanted to know things from, that I wanted to network with and learn from.
Absolutely.
So there were two levels of getting the designation. One is the information that they were giving me.
Without question.
But the other one was getting to meet people who weren't doing this as a part-time job,
Right.
who weren't doing this because
They were committed.
They were committed people
Right.
who wanted to do this. So that was
Yeah.
another really important thing.
I agree with you.
designations.
I do forget that, but I know CRS, which is now part of the Residential Real Estate Council, RRC, they always talk about, I think the average this is years ago.
Years
These are
ago.
the stats
I
were in my
remember.
head. The average broker was earning $32,000 a year, and anybody who had a designation was earning in the 50s. And I'm pretty sure those numbers are probably stagnant, but very similar.
But very similar, because people who are doing designations are paying attention to
Correct.
this. Are paying attention. What other things that Illinois Realtors is... Oh, well, let's back it up, because I do want to talk about another one. Let's talk... It's going to be a crazy video.
Beep, 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 beep. I'm sorry.
Talk to me a little bit. One of the things that I have learned working at an association that I probably didn't at some of my other jobs realize was how important advocacy was at the state, local, at the national, state, and local level. I think it is the most, honestly right now, I think it's the most important thing we do, and it's probably the thing we publicize and promote and talk about and address the least. So here's your
Without
opportunity.
question.
Really, here's your opportunity to address that.
Oh my God, we could talk about this for days. It's funny because when you asked me earlier about what's going on with NAR, and we had that brief conversation, all things being equal, if every bit of the National Association of Realtors went away and we were just left with advocacy, I would still pay thousands upon thousands to be a member. Because what they do at the national level is they just keep onerous and horrible legislation from affecting the country. And what we do at the state capitol is the same exact thing. And those folks, Jimmy Clayton and Betsy Mitchell and Jeff and that entire team, Greg St. Aubin, they work tirelessly to create relationships and to make sure that they present three sides to every coin. It's not just the intended consequence, but it's the unintended. And hey, what happens if this happens? And what happens if that happens? Are we going to be okay? And how is this going to affect everything? It's incredible information. I'm the Federal Political Coordinator, FPC, for Brad Schneider, who's up here in the Illinois 10th District. And his office always says to me that they are so grateful for the realtors because A, we mobilize, number one.
Yes.
So every time we get a call for action, his office and all the state legislator offices are flooded with calls and whatnot, letters, emails from all of the realtor members. But he always says that we provide information that is accurate and timely and truthful. And that's like the highest compliment I
That is
could
a
ever
lovely
get,
compliment.
right?
Yes.
So we do so much. Obviously, education is a huge part of it, and the ability to provide education and to learn the trade and the craft and to just be better, with hot topics and whatnot. But I hate when I ask people, like, are you political? And they say, oh, no, I'm not political at all. Or I don't vote. Makes me crazy. Just makes me crazy. People died so you could vote, right?
Well, and voting not only on the national level, because I'd say a lot of people vote on the national level, especially in the last
Not as
few
many
years,
as we would like.
we would like. But when you get down to the local level,
Yeah, which is the most important level,
right,
frankly.
exactly. So few people vote, and this is what's going to happen in your town. Pay attention here.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. But they're constantly. I mean, that's the funny thing. Like at the state level, which I can speak to, we are constantly like battling just horrible legislation where towns want to go to home rule and people don't understand what home rule is. We just had this whole Bring Chicago Home tax, which was just defeated in the courts, thankfully.
Yes.
Stop hiding what you're actually trying to do. I had lunch the other day with an alderman, and we were talking about it. I said, how do you feel? And she said, it's funny because there are things the way they're presented at City Hall are very different than the way they are in the general public. And the language that they wrote was so horrendous and so confusing, which is why it was thrown out, frankly.
Yes.
And that happens constantly. You want to be able to go ahead and help anybody who's interested in the American dream, right? And that means owning land and a house or a tiny house or a boat or whatever it is that you want to put on there,
Yes.
right? I mean, you should be able to do that without having to worry that somebody's going to tax you up the yin-yang and
make it
just make it
impossible.
impossible to make changes to it. I mean, certainly there are regulations that are required. I mean, we all know what the obvious are. But
Yes.
at the same time, just to be able to have that American dream at your fingertips is what we're all about.
All right, we're almost at the end of our interview. What's the last? He could sit and do this all
How
day.
did this
you
go
and I.
so fast?
I'm
That's
telling
crazy.
you and I could sit and
Okay.
do this all day. What do you want everybody to know? What do you want everybody to know? If the next 100 people listen to this, what would you like them? What's the most important thing they should know about you, about Illinois Realtors, or about? I'll give you even life in general.
I think what I want everybody to know is that, just speaking for myself, and I would assume for Illinois Realtors, is that we're in a very difficult period of time, right? Where it doesn't matter what direction you look at, it seems, there's an attack of some nature. There's a terrible bill, there's bad legislation, there's, bad actors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just want people to know that as I'm sitting here as president in 2024, that I see them and that I hear them and that I'm going to fight for them. And I know Illinois Realtors I just got chills. Illinois Realtors feels the same way. They want to make sure that your membership dollars that we all pay to our locals and our, in our state and our national, can't control what happens at national. we do a pretty great job of making sure that all the local associations are on board and doing what they can. We provide as many resources as we can. We're 30,000 feet, right? The day-to-day stuff has to be handled by the local. But I think in the long run, we want to take that dollar and stretch it as far as we can, make it $10, right? Not to collect, but to just get value for the proposition, right? And what we do, aside from the advocacy and providing education, we throw incredible conferences, right? I mean, there's so much information at these things, and
Capital Conference is coming up.
Capital Conference is coming up April 10th.
Yeah.
It's our CapCon Lobby Day. Rhody Realtor of the Year dinner, honoring all the local association realtors of the year, and then the state Rhody, that's coming up on April 9th. So it's a great time to come down. Shameless plug. But I just want people to know that we see them, we hear them, and we are here for them. And they're always going to get the straight answer. It's not going to be a winding, wait, what did he mean by that kind of a response. I don't work in those areas. Unfortunately, as I said, we're in a little bit of a gray space right now, kind of waiting for that judge to make his ruling. But, you know, realtors are resilient. They donate time and they volunteer more than any other group. That's all written in the national books. I mean, people know that. And I love being surrounded by people like that. Servant leadership and having a volunteer heart, I'd rather be nowhere else.
All right, I love that, a volunteer heart. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my
This was
pleasure.
a wonderful interview. Thank you so much.